Didn't you do like production and stuff?
Years ago.
Like always fills me with confidence. That. Now, hi everyone. How you doing? I'm well. Thank you for asking. Yeah, it's nice to be asked about. For those of you who sent me project proposals, thank you very much. I've had a look. Don't think anyone's got any problems at all so far. The rest of you, can you please have some ideas and send them to me tonight, tomorrow, something like that, and I will okay you to go. So this is going to be. I hope it's not going to be a boring lecture, but that is an awful show. That team sucks and blows at the same time. The season taken over 33 years. Anyway, so there's a lot of theory that I've got to plough through today, but it's extremely important theory, and I wouldn't usually do this, but I think it gets more important the longer we go into the lecture. So the last dozen or so slides are going to be directly relevant to people's projects, both the first one and the reflective essay that comes afterwards. And indeed, the content right at the end of this lecture, I'm going to kind of make you talk about it in one or the other of those. I'm going to expect you to reflect on this because it's really, really important stuff. So that doesn't mean like take a seat back and relax, and obviously I will interact during the lecture as well. But this is going to be less of an interactive lecture than most that I would do. This is going to be a bit more theory heavy than I would normally like to do as well. The title of the lecture, Social Media and Society, is really, we can take out the word social in some ways here. Because what I want us to go through today is the relationship between media and society, and how different media have structured societies in different ways. So instantly, the lecture is a development of the sort of ideas you get in Marshall McLuhan's work. When you'll know, having banged on about in loads of different modules now, McLuhan talked about the relationship between media and different, what he called eras of history. I would position that more as eras of society, how societies have changed over time with the media that they've used. And in the past 20 years, and it's really interesting, today is actually the 20th anniversary of the launch of Facebook in 2004. Today is the day. In the previous 20 years, we have seen society, what I would call, mutate. Not just change, but totally mutate. You can take a seat or what?
Yeah.
Yeah, you take your time.
Sorry.
That's all right. We've got 2 hours. How uncomfortable Tom feels. I shouldn't give a shit about that. So, what was I talking about? Yes. In the last 2 decades, we have seen society mutate because changes in the past have been slow and gradual. But thanks to the instantaneous nature of digital media itself, changes that arise from the presence of digital media tend to be far more rapid than changes that we've seen at a societal level in the past. To the extent to which it is almost impossible for me now to relate to anything that you guys do in terms of media content. I look at things on TikTok and I basically sit there just shaking my head thinking, what the hell is wrong with you people? There's nothing wrong with you people. There's nothing wrong with me either. It's just that the intergenerational gap is vast now, and it changes so quickly because of the speed of the media which we use, the speed being an essential property of digital media. Anyway, we are going to look at different kinds of society and how they relate to specific kinds of media. But I'm not going all the way back to printing press and stuff like that. You've done that before. I'm going to start in really the 1950s, 1960s, and move up from there. So we're going to look at what's called disciplinary society. And I say the pre-IT world, but it's not quite the pre-IT world. It's the sort of beginnings of the IT world as well. Then society of control by Gilles Deleuze. The network society, which was an idea that gained prominence about 20 years ago and became a dominant form of thinking about online communications at that time. The platform society, which became a dominant idea about 10 years ago, and now something which isn't a dominant idea, but which is an incredibly important idea, and one which is going to become more important in the next few years. We see in media studies like paradigm shifts over time, and this is where the paradigm is shifting to now, so we're on it early. It's called the Achievement Society, what I think is closest to being the social media society. How many questions so far? Outstanding. Then let's begin. Okay. Let's begin with a question before we go any further. How many of you swiped in? By a show of hands. Excellent. Why did you do that? Attendance. Fuck do you care? Now, let's take that back a little step. You probably care a great deal about your attendance, but we're going to unpick why that is. How many of you are in receipt of student finance? There's no shame in it. Let's have a look. That means like student loans, somebody pays your fees for you. Most of you, okay. Did you know that when you were in receipt of student finance, first year, you signed an agreement with them? Anyone know that? A contract, perfect, yeah. You signed a contract with student finance. Did you read it? You did? Your auntie read it for you. Delegation, I like it. Is your auntie a solicitor?
She works in finance.
There we are, tidy. Anyone else read it? Fantastic. Has anyone read the terms and conditions to anything they've ever signed up for? Why?
Just because I want to know what I'm actually getting into.
And did it help?
No.
Ah, there we go. Okay, there's a great South Park episode about this where Kyle signs up terms and conditions to have an Apple iPad when they first come out, and he ends up becoming part of a human centipede. Now, I don't have a problem with the human centipede as a concept, as long as I'm in the front. At any point behind that, and I'm not happy at all, he's not in the front. Anyway, I don't believe that student finance make you sign a contract that says you're going to be part of a human centipede, but I've never read it, so I don't know. They might well have that in there as a stipulation. Go back and have a read later to make sure. What it does say in that contract is that your student finance agreement is contingent on your attendance at lectures and seminars at the university. And does anyone know what the magic number is that you have to hit in order to keep your student finance agreement going? It's in the contract. 85%. You must attend 85% of lectures and seminars at university in order to be in receipt of student finance. So I will ask you, everyone, a secondary question. How many of you believe that they have attended 85% or more of all lectures and seminars that have been held since they started at Swansea University? A few. Okay. The rest of you are at risk of having your money taken off you. Wouldn't that be bad? So, we will go back to what you said. You swipe in because of attendance. Why'd you do that? You get an email. What powers the email? What do you think powers the email?
Warning.
A warning about what? What do you think? Do you think the university cares about you? Good. That's a very important insight right there. Okay? The university doesn't give a shit about me, you, or anyone else. So it's not about, like, are you okay? Are you eating? Are you talking to the folks? Anything like that. Why are they doing it? Why do you get a warning?
Because I know if you have this money,
We're getting somewhere. Why do you think the university targets you with emails if you're not attending? Because the university has a strict system in place to target attendance. The attendance target is based on what the university knows is a problem with them getting money. Because your tuition fee loan doesn't go to you, it goes to the university. So if you are in a position to jeopardize that money, the university will let you know, because the university cares about the money that you bring into the institution, because that money pays for all the wonderful things that you have at university, like these wonderful facilities that we're in at the moment, and these desks and chairs which look like they've come out of some kind of 1970s documentary. All of that stuff is paid for by your tuition fees. What a wonderful system we live in. So therefore, the university has decreed that the most efficient way, and please take a note of that word, efficient. The most efficient way of monitoring where people are is, somebody got a card with them. Oh, do you know what? I do. There we go. Is to give everyone one of these, right? Okay, excellent. And then you go up here, and it won't work for me, but you swipe there. See, it doesn't work for me. They do a fuck right. Well, they do give it up. I'll come back to that in a second. So, we all have one of these. Yeah? Does anyone know what's in this? How it gets that to work?
A magnetic strip or something?
Do you see one?
The sheets.
Because you know when you have a bank card and that, you've got a magnetic strip across the back of, and that encodes the information basically, which matches with your PIN to do a digital handshake to unlock the account. Okay? We don't have one on this, but you are definitely on the right lines there.
Is it copper wiring?
The sheets.
Is it what?
Copper wiring?
I'm one of these.
You buy our sheets inside.
There's a chip inside, yes, but it's a specific kind of chip.
There's a barcode on the front.
It's barcode on the front, but that's for reading different things. That's for you using the barcode system in the library and so on. Can you still put money on these to buy stuff? You used to be able to like charge up these cards to buy your shit in the coffee shops and stuff. I don't know if they do that anymore. Okay. So you all have one of these, yeah? Where'd you keep it?
Wallet.
Wallet? Anyone else?
Pocket.
Pocket. This has what's called an RFID chip. Now, if you look at what an RFID chip is, but an RFID chip gets read by an RFID scanner. So basically, these are RFID scanners, readers. You swipe against it. It has a unique chip in each one, so that records where you are at that point in time. RFID chips are really, really handy for keeping tracks on people about where they go. You can put RFID scanners everywhere, all over the place, like this university has. So in these ones, you have to do a deliberate thing, but there's RFID scanners all over the institution, and it keeps track of where you are at all times when you're in the university. That's really useful information for people like grades and so on, because they'll know where you go, when you go past, if you do it regularly. They can then target you with targeted information via email about promotions and so on, and they'll know what time you're going past because you've given patterns and patterns of data all the time. Your RFID card is a way of locating you at all times, if the institution wants to do that. Now you might want to think, why would the Swansea City University want to sell data on me? Well, why does anyone want to sell data on you? It makes money. So, your attendance is powered by a system which means that you have to carry about with you at all times a chip which can be used to locate you via data any time of the day. It's good, isn't it? Who's depressed? Welcome to the 21st century. I would say that this is a very bad thing, but unfortunately you're carrying one of the most powerful digital tracking devices ever created in your pocket at all times anyway. One that produces pages and pages of locational data about you every minute of every day. So let's not worry too much about the RFID card anymore. But what we have just outlined is a system. The attendance system at Swansea University is built on multiple points of data and multiple points of behaviour. Did you have these at school for attendance? It's odd
Yeah,
Some
Yeah.
schools do and some schools don't, and there's a weird sort of thing going on. There's a weird debate going on about across schools across the UK about whether these are intrusions of privacy for kids. You know, you shouldn't be collecting data on kids for some reason. It's like, really? We've been doing that since time immemorial. And we've now got a weird thing in schools where people are saying, like, having them swipe a card, that's really bad. But facial recognition software, that's good apparently for some unbeknownst reason. It's like, that's even more creepy. Anyway, these systems do particular things. They don't just do something in terms of the overall bureaucracy that runs here, which is, at the end of the day, financially driven. Swansea University want to make sure that students attend because that will affect the bottom line of the university at the end of the day. They're not particularly interested in your aims as an individual. They're up to you. You know, what you want to achieve is your business. What the university wants to achieve is that you come and they can draw down the tuition fees. This system fits in with all sorts of other systems that are running at the university at the same time. But the system provokes particular kinds of behaviour. For example, when you walk into the room, you swipe. And you all just do that unthinkingly now, right? That is a behaviour created by the system. It's a behaviour directly created by media, because this is a form of media, that is a form of media, the data that's transferred is all media stuff. So media provokes different kinds of behaviours in this. And this is a good example of how that works in a digital society. But it also does something important about people. This has formed a new kind of person in this room. At school, you didn't have to do this. But now, you make sure you have this with you. So when you go to lectures, you can swipe in. Because you want to avoid the nasty email that comes from student support, saying, why aren't you in? What are you doing? What is going on? You are deliberately avoiding that communication, right? So you change your behaviour accordingly. You make sure you have this available. That's quite disturbing. It means you've lost your ability to exercise any free will over this whatsoever. You are doing it to avoid punishment. That's not a free decision. You are being coerced. There is a power relationship between you and the system that's been put in place. And the system that's put in place has won that power relationship. It is making you do something. That is problematic. But we do this all the time. This is the nature of how media transforms. And that kind of relationship has been identified over many, many years. We'll talk about Michel Foucault with you in MS-200. Yeah? Yeah. Good. Excellent. What do we know about Michel Foucault then, people? Apart from him being a dead French dude. Do we know anything else? Wow me with your learning.
He's a structuralist.
Very nice. What's that mean?
The way in which meanings created, so basically meanings fixed, assigned.
Fixed by what?
Through the way in which we identify something in relation to the world around us.
That's not bad. It's not bad. Now, some might call Foucault a post-structuralist on that basis, because although he believes the structure being important, he also believes the structures can change on that basis. Michel Foucault, French sociologist writing in the 1970s and early 1980s before his sad passing away in 1984. Foucault talked about what is called a disciplinary society. Now, this is a very famous image related not just to Foucault, but also the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Does anyone know what that's of?
It's all a prison.
A prison. Outstanding. This is a prison, and the idea of this kind of prison was created by Jeremy Bentham, hence the association. Do you know what it's called, Con, the prison?
No, but I remember they only need like 5 guards for it.
The panopticon, yeah. You only need about 5 guards. The idea of the prison here is decidedly creepy. You put the guards in the middle and all the prisoners on the outside. Therefore, you only need the guards in the middle. because they can see everything all at once. Hence panopticon, panop as in perception, or con, around, so you can perceive all things around at all times. Now what Foucault believed was this was much like modern society, this structure. You had at the core of society what he calls the disciplinary elements of a society. Basically he's talking about the state, but in reality he's talking about lots of the different things that make up the state, like the education system, the health system, etc., the social security system, these kind of things, the police, all these things are the core of the state, basically. Foucault envisaged that the state sits in the middle, and we sit on the outside. And the reason why we behave like good boys and girls in society is we're fearful of what's in the middle. We're fearful of always being seen by that authority that sits in the middle of society. So you don't trash the place because the old bail might come around and nick you, right? Because they're there and they can see you at all times. And how does the state see? He said that the state sees through what we call bureaucracies. In any given society, we are subject to loads and loads of bureaucratic methods that give the state lots of information about us, so they literally know who we are. And it starts at an incredibly early age. Basically, the state initiates the organisation of what he calls vast spaces of enclosure. The individual never ceases passing from one enclosed environment to another, each having its own laws. So you start with the family, which is very enclosed, then school, then what he called the barracks. You know, this is based on 19th century, sort of rite of passage. Then the factory, then the hospital, then the prison, perhaps, if you're not very good at stuff. Basically, bureaucracy, 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 bureaucracy throughout your life that is always monitoring what you're doing. And therefore, you become a subject of that state. You become a type of person who is conditioned by the continual bureaucracy. What are you going to say?
I was going to say family doesn't seem like bureaucracy.
Why not? Isn't it? Isn't the entire idea of like a family system that has to be father, mother, children, a normative set of structures which are passed down to us? You know, not just from the state, but also by other sort of moral systems as well, which are contributors. What Foucault would argue are contributors to the system. Sort of the normative idea of the family is a bureaucratic structure. And so, in many ways, that's why, you know, post-1960s, this becomes a problem where we see the sort of that nuclear family idea break down in society. There are the reasons why people throw their hands up and say, oh my god, this is the end of society, is because it kind of is the breakup of this system in many ways. That you become conditioned at an early age to know that, you think about a young kid, right, living in that nuclear family, what you become conditioned to do is, I can't be naughty in this space, because mum and dad will see. So it's that all-seeingness of it as well. So, it's a point well made. You know, I don't think Foucault means it to be literal, like it's a bureaucratic thing, but it's the desired structure of how the state would want the family to be. So, basically for Foucault, our lives, or the lives of people that he was looking at in his research, were conditioned by the discipline that was given to them by all these different parts of society. What's the okay? I don't think there's much wrong with Foucault's view. Okay, I think Foucault's view makes a lot of sense. And I still think Foucault's view makes a lot of sense for a lot of the things we encounter in life. But what Foucault proposed was this idea that there's always some kind of authority figure in the middle of everything. That's why the panoptical model kind of works. The panopticon is based on the idea that the prisoners will always behave themselves because there's always an authority figure in the middle who might see what they're doing. There's a really interesting thing that comes out of the Holocaust about this. The SS conducted some experiments in some of the concentration camps where they left the guard towers empty to see if people would escape. And people wouldn't. People knew that they were empty, but they thought it was a trick. Do you understand what I mean? The prisoners in the camps would look at these things and say, well, the guards are gone. It must be a trick. This is like the ultimate disciplinary society camp like that, where you're being watched all the time, surrounded in fences and electrical wire. No escape is possible from that environment. And like, they would almost like offer people the chance of escaping, but people wouldn't. It kind of that weirdly confirms what Foucault was talking about. That when you're in a disciplinary society, it's not that you can see the person that's watching you, it's that you know you can always be watched and supported. That's the thing that conditions you all the time. Now, it's that idea of watching which has transformed since IT. If we think that the IT revolution, information technology revolution in society starts around post-Second World War, Will would have done a lecture on this. Like, probably around postmodernism, I'm thinking. We talked about the rise of the IT society. And like Will, I agree with him on this. It's kind of post-1945 is the IT age. Now, what you get with information technology is basically no need to have anyone in the tower anymore. The great advance that information technology has made on society has meant that we no longer need a panopticon. Because if you collect enough information about people and track people enough, you don't need anyone to watch. They end up watching themselves. And this is the great shift from what we call a disciplinary society to what Gilles Deleuze calls a society of control. Deleuze was writing about this in the early 1990s. So even before the internet became a widespread phenomenon, Deleuze identified that we had undergone a massive societal shift from the panoptical society of the disciplinary society into a society of control. As Deleuze says in his work on this, the postscript of the societies of control, which you can read, it's only a few pages long, it's really, really important, but it's only a couple of pages. In disciplinary societies, the individual passes from one closed environment to the other. Now, societies of control operating with computers are replacing disciplinary societies. The numerical language of control is made of codes that allow or disallow access to information. We no longer deal with the mass or the individual pair. Individuals have become I can never say this. Individuals, samples, data, markets. The disciplinary society was in place to control masses, to control all the people in a society, which is a very difficult thing to do if you've got millions of people living in a society. It's quite a hard thing to keep people under control. What Deleuze is saying is that a move to information technology means we no longer have to control masses of people. Instead, what you can do is make people into individuals based on data about them. You can identify people very, very closely by virtue of all their biometric data, all their personal data, all their history, all their health history, all their educational history, who they're married to, who they live next to, what area they're in, what car they own, etc. You can have all of that in one individual record of them. You no longer have to think about the mass across record. And you can control on the basis of knowing about the individual instead of trying to control the mass all at once. So, a controlled society doesn't work by having people in the middle looking at everyone. It instead works by having a load of stuff out there looking at you. No longer do we need the policeman in the middle who can see everything going around them, because now we have the IT equipment out there that means we can just look at you, and me, and everyone else. Everyone can be surveilled individually, rather than having surveillance at the middle of everybody. What's remarkable about this is that Deleuze did identify this before the age of big data, before the age where we were all literally carrying devices that produce masses of data with us. In 1992, The internet existed, sure, it existed at that point for the best point, nearly 25 years at that point, but nobody was using it. I was like 12 when this paper came out. I'd never been on the internet at 12. You know, I didn't have a phone or anything like that. But what the leaders identified was that isn't important because already IT systems in place at that time knew lots about me. They knew about where I went to school, where I was born, where I lived, what my parents did, etc., etc. All that information that wasn't part of the disciplinary society was part even of me at that age. So we move society forward. No longer are people scared of that thing in the middle. Instead, we're not really scared of anything, which is the weird thing in society of control. We're not scared of like an individual authority figure that's going to wag their finger at you and say, no, that's bad, don't do it. Bad! Because control is distributed all amongst us. It's not about being afraid of something, it's about being nudged and coerced into doing things all the time. Because you are always being pushed towards different things. Because you are always being measured, always being tracked, always being pushed in certain directions. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, right? So I grew up in Swansea. And there's a street in Swansea, in the middle of Swansea, right, called Oxford Street. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Oxford Street. Even if you don't know the name of it, I expect a lot of you actually walk down Oxford Street. It's the street, for want of a better way, it's got like H&M on it, and Topshop, and a bunch of other crap, right? And it's at the top of the street, there's a building up there, it's got a scaffold on it for about 25 years at this point, okay, the longest scaffolding in history. Now, Oxford Street when I was a kid had loads more shops, loads more cool things. It was like 4 record shops when I was a kid, it was awesome. But loads more crime. It's like you could get robbed down Oxford Street no trouble. In the middle of the day, no problem whatsoever. If you didn't know what you were doing. Why was that? Well, because there was police about, but the police in the 90s tended to be old and fat and you could run away from them pretty quickly, right? So you get a lot of pickpockets around there, you get a lot of street crime, etc., etc. And then towards the end of the 90s, all that stopped. Swansea City Centre actually became a lot safer for people to walk around in. Does anyone know why?
You can't internet.
No, not because of the internet.
There's a lot of police that walk around that road.
In fact, I would argue there were fewer police.
It's a CCTV.
CCTV. Towards the mid and late 90s, there was a huge amount of investment by Swansea Council for CCTV cameras in Swansea City Centre. To the extent to which I think at one point, I remember reading this in a newspaper, that Oxford Street itself was one of the most heavily surveilled streets in Britain in terms of the number of CCTV cameras on it. You could walk from one end to the other and you would pass a couple of hundred CCTV cameras. And people stopped robbing because the cameras were all there. Now, does anyone operate under the impression that CCTV cameras, there's somebody watching those cameras? There never was. I think it went through everyone's head because they're still in that disciplinary mode of thinking that, you know, all these CCTV cameras, and there's going to be somebody sitting in a room somewhere with hundreds of screens in front of them looking at every scrote in Swansea who's on the rob. So that's not what happens. If you're lucky, they might be working. I doubt it. And if you, you know, and then somebody will have to go back and play the tapes back and that. There's never anyone looking at all this stuff. But it's the idea that changes behaviour. The idea that all of a sudden, it's not that person in the middle you have to look out for. You don't have to look for the guy with the funny shaped hat who might come running after you. Instead, it's all around you. Even if you can see the cameras or not, as the case was often, you would know, you know, CCTV is in operation here, but you wouldn't be able to see the camera. That provoked change. That's what the news is talking about in the society of control. We're aware that it's around, You know, we know, roughly speaking, that that stuff is about. And it's about all the time. It's about with your RFID enabled car. You're continually being picked up on that information. And
It's like in rural areas you get those fake speed cameras and then the neighbourhood watch signs as well.
there's no neighbourhood watch. Nobody has ever been in a neighbourhood watch. I have never met a single human being who's been part of a neighbourhood watch group. And if you have, you know that that is a synonym for swingers. Okay? That the only thing that's going on in that group is stuff that you don't want to go there, right? You know, because you look at people and you think, oh no, I don't want to think of that. So you know that that's an illusory thing. Right? But it's a powerful illusion. It's like when you see, I used to, like years ago, right? 20 years ago, I used to be a van delivery driver. You know, like these dickheads who live in France. Right? I invented the process of chucking shit over someone's board because they weren't in. Believe me, they've stolen that from me. I used to come up against loads of signs in places like beware of the dog. And you cotton on after a while, there isn't a dog. There's no fucking dog in any. No place that's got a dog as a sign that says beware of the dog. You can hear the frickin' dog if they've got a dog. You don't need the sign. Places that don't have dogs have the sign to warn people to stay out of them. But there ain't no dog. So, interesting way that we can use deception to get people to do stuff that we like. Anyway, the society of control evolves from the 90s and becomes all-powerful later on. What we see in the transformation from a disciplinary society to a controlled society is change in capitalist governance in particular. Wilbur again talked about this in the rise of neoliberalism. But neoliberalism as a sort of economic creed is all about information, basically. Collect as much information about people as possible. You say because of that strategic shifts in power relations between elements of society. So a lot of people in society will say, you know what, do you know what's wrong with Britain today? There's not enough police on the streets. You ever heard that argument? Like boomers going on? When I was a kid, there was police on the streets all the time, and that meant the streets were safer. Well, the evidence suggests that the streets are safer now with fewer police. And the reason being is, you don't need any fucking police anymore. Because we can track people all the time. And instead, we've created a generation of people as well who believe that they're being watched at all times, who've internalised the message. This is why, you know, I'm really infuriated with your generation because none of you know how to steal things properly. Because you're all worried about being caught. Do you know I went to Tesco this morning? This is being recorded. I don't give a fuck. I went to Tesco this morning. I had to get coffee and milk for, because I got like a coffee machine in my office around my desk. So the coffee and, like, you know, have you had that coffee in, what's that shit old place called? Ray's. That is the most manking stuff I've ever. That is somebody basically coming in with them filters from their house, scooping it out and putting it in a machine. It is absolutely buzzing. Don't drink that stuff, right? So I make my own coffee. Now, while I was in Tesco in Sketty this morning, I thought, you know what, I really fancy a Kit Kat chunky. I quite like them. They're alright, like, because they're better than the full finger ones. So I looked at it, it was like 85 pence. I said, fuck that, I'm not paying 85 pence. So I just put it in my coat pocket, paid for my stuff and went. Nobody cares. It's a fucking Kit Kat. Nobody cares. Right? 85p. I robbed a Kit Kat this morning. People will not do that anymore because you're worried about being caught because of strategic shifts in power relations. You think it's all around you. It's like, oh, I'm going to get caught. Fuck that. Who cares if you're going to get caught? Anyway, it's 85p. What, do you think you're going to down? I don't think so. Okay, so steal more. Okay? Learn how to steal. Learn how to be cool. Stealing. Okay? In that shop over there in Costco. Easy to steal. Okay? So, we see strategic shifts in power relations in society. Okay? The thing about being organised by codes is really important. Basically, what Deleuze argues is that previously society was hierarchically structured in different ways, which gave us access to information. That hierarchical structure has changed somewhat by virtue of what information we can access as individuals. That's what he means by codes. Some of us have codes which allow us to access information, some of us don't. So that's what Deleuze actually means by that. Flexible systems are captured in ways that fixed enclosures are not. Deleuze is at pains to explain that previously we had these fixed structures in society, like the school, the hospital, the church, etc. Control needs none of these things. Control can operate across society without the structural elements of society. Hence, going back to your point earlier, Deleuze is definitely what we would call a post-structuralist, because he believes that structuralism doesn't need to exist for control to exist. So these things are not as visible as or overt as discipline and facilitated in by IT and computers. Now I want to use Deleuze as the jumping off point here. I still think that Deleuze's insights are extremely important, albeit the fact that they're 30 years old now. And we still do largely exist in a society of control. But on top of that, we have other conceptualizations of society which are important. The next one that came along, which had a major impact, was the idea of the network. This is a post-internet theory. So the idea of the network society emerges in the early 2000s, around about half a decade after the internet was popularized in 1995 with the launch of Windows 95. This was, at the time, a key metaphor for understanding digital culture, and it is one you will still see used in places. It's a much weaker metaphor than it once was, and it had significant problems, the idea of the network society, but nevertheless, it is important. The reason why it's not necessarily hugely important to us is because we're not trying to understand networks in this module. We're trying to understand culture. And network theory and culture don't match up really well as far as I'm concerned. Network theory is a lot more about power relations rather than cultural relations. So, but it can be useful in some ways. Basically, network society places us as nodes in a network. Do you know what I mean by a node? So here we have a network, for example. This could be me, and these are all the things I'm linked to. So a typical person in this room might be a node in a network that includes this institution, their landlord, their family, their employer, etc., etc. And you have links to all of these. And you are a node in a network that has been created around you. So within this, what is important to note about the network society is that the advocates of it argue that the network is the thing that has the power, not the individual nodes in society. This is why instantly, when I was doing my PhD, I had a massive aversion to this theory, because I instantly saw it as being dehumanizing. It basically says we have no agency. Just the networks that we belong to have all this emergent power, and we don't have any power at all. So that doesn't make any sense to me, because I can just leave the network. Sure, Christ, I have some power, you know. So instantly I was kind of against it, but we can still salvage some stuff out of this, I think. And in particular, there's one idea from network society which is very important to us. The key theorist with regards to network society is this guy, Manuel Castells, who wrote a series of books in the mid-2000s called The Information Age, which became highly, highly influential in understanding digital society as it existed at that time. Now, what Castells does is introduce 4 kinds of power in what he calls the network society. Networking power, network power, networked power, and network-making power. He's really keen on that word, as you can see. He's all about network, this guy. Defines power as the relational capacity that enables a social actor, i.e. me, or you, or anyone else in here, to influence asymmetrically the decisions of other social actors in ways that favour the empowered actor's wills, interests and values. This is where I think Castells becomes interesting when we think about social media. Basically, he reduces everyone down, be it a company, a device, an individual, down to this idea of social actor. We're all different kinds of social actor. And for Castells then, power is all about asymmetries. in a power relationship, somebody holds the power, somebody holds less power. If it was a symmetrical relationship, we'd have equal amounts of power, but he calls it an asymmetrical relationship, in that some people have more power than others. So let's think about it in terms of social media. What Castells would argue is that we enter into networks with organisations or companies that run these social media platforms, and they have asymmetric power relations to us. They hold the power, we're just a node in the network. So the material that they decide to show us algorithmically influences us. They are in the power position, we can't influence back. What we do doesn't influence that company, they influence us. Get what I mean? Make sense? This is Castell's notion of how digital society basically works, that in a network you have some actors that have a lot of power and some actors who have very little power. So it's all about power, basically. Now for Castell's, power is all about coercion, all about violence, domination, manipulation, all stuff that I like, you know, in my everyday life, but not stuff that I want to have happen to me. You know, I'm quite happy to dominate people with violence and coercion, but I don't want it happening to me back. So Castells basically draws on Foucault, Weber and Habermas and argues that he builds on the structuration theory, which we looked on last week. Now for me, Castells doesn't actually understand what kind of structuration theory means, because if you remember the diagram I showed you of Anthony Giddens last week, it was all about how actors and social structures are in a constant relationship with one another, changing one another. Social structures change actors, but those changes drive changes in the social structure as well. Castells has none of that in his theory. He basically thinks that those top level actors, you know, so the structures around us completely overpower us at all times. So I'm going to leave this up here. There's extra information in the slides if you want to grab all this and drop it into essays or what have you. Giddens doesn't think that power is about power, you know, coercion or violence. He doesn't make any reference to that in his work, actually. The problem with Castell's notion of power is he sees horrible power relationships as being the foundation of society. Now, simply put, that's not really true. That's not how societies work. And the whole history of humankind and all social situations have not been characterized by domineering power relations either. And that's not the reality of our interactions in social media either. So Castell's notion of how the network society works doesn't actually reflect the reality of what we do. There's no mention of cooperation in Castell's work whatsoever. But one of the most important things that's emerged with online culture has been the ability to cooperate with others. And yet Castell's has no notion of that whatsoever. So why do I keep talking about Castells in this context? Well, the reason why I keep talking about Castells is this. The idea of laws. Castells is one of the most important thinkers in terms of network law. The idea that networks have rules, that they work in particular ways, and that works to organise society in particular ways. That's a very, very important thing, because we can remember back to Merowitz and McLuhan that the structure of media has an influence on the structure of the society that emerges from it. And that is very important. Now, networks have become a defining structural characteristic of society, and therefore they're critically important in understanding our culture. So there is, with that idea that networks have rules about how they work, something important in how society is structured. And it brings me back to the university again. So, it's a long time since I was an undergraduate student. And I feel almost somewhere to sit down. It was a long time ago. Nobody gave a shit about me as an undergraduate student. Nobody cared if I turned up. Nobody cared who I was. Just, I was invisible. I could make a relationship with lecturers and staff by going to see them. But at the end of the day, if I didn't bother for 3 years, nobody cared. If you didn't turn up for 3 years, nobody cared. Why do you think they changed that? The magic word, money. Do you think I paid to come to university?
Yes.
I did actually. But does anyone has a good guess what my tuition fees were?
2,000.
Yes, less than 2,000.
We have 1,000 and eventually.
I used to pay 1,000 quid a year tuition fees. I missed out on having free tuition fees by 1 year, which was a bit upsetting at the time. But I had to pay £1,000 a year tuition fees. Terrible. Oh my god, I broke my heart at the time. It's like 3,000 quid. How am I ever going to pay that money off? I have a huge amount of sympathy for everyone, it's true. So, as that went on, the idea emerged that actually by charging people to use the university, you had to change the relationship. No longer could you have the idea that students were just some nebulous thing that came and went and nobody gave a shit about. Now you were taking money off them. There was expectations from students like, well, what am I paying for? Now, for my £1,000 a year, I don't know what that made for. No idea. For 9,000, I'd expect to be told what I'm getting. So, what has happened? Remember, that's a movement which has largely happened in the 21st century. Because of the influence of network society, what has happened in the reconceptualization of students to the university is an adaptation of the network model. You are now conceived by the university as nodes in the system. When you pay your money, very important thing, when you pay that money to access the system, you are given a digital identity, given a student number, right? That allows you to log into the network and access a whole bunch of stuff. Plus you're given a card with that number on, which allows you to access some services. You have become a node in a wider system, with all the other students who are also nodes in the system, and you have entered into a network with the university which provides you with other opportunities to access different parts of the network, but not all of them. You know, you can't access some of the stuff. You know, I can access stuff that you can't access, and vice versa. So we're given some access and not some other access. Like the news says with the idea of the codes, we're given some codes and not other codes. There's somebody in the university who can access everything. You know, they can look at everything that's going on, and I bet that person, I always imagine that person sitting in like a big leather chair with a white cat, stroking it like that, and like he's got a big cigar, and he's just evil, you know, and he's probably my boss or something. The structure of how universities adjusted to tuition fees was basically taken from the ideas of network society. How do we get students more involved? We're going to make them nodes in this big network. You see the word network used loads of times in stuff from the university. Join our network. Join this, become part of the network. Richard Thomas uses it all the time. Do you know these emails which he's sending you constantly, right? He's always talking about networks in them. And I have told him before, it's like, dude, you know I teach the second years that network society is a really fucking bad idea, right? And you keep on banging on about it, you've been doing it for years, he never stopped because he doesn't listen to me. But that's okay as well, because that's the relationship we have. Basically, the network society, we see it proliferate in all over, you know, our lives. Basically, we're asked to become part of something, even in things as mundane as buying car insurance. You buy car insurance, you do it online, and they give you like a link to their website where you can download some documents. That's your car insurance thing now. You become part of their big network. You're a node in that network. You can't contact the other nodes, and you can only access the network in a very small way. So the power all sits in one part of the network, the company itself. You're just a powerless little node in it.
Surely that's just the culture of our society though, rather than the network of it. And the idea of like becoming a student.
Flip that the other way around. So the culture of our society is based on the idea of networks. That how we become part of a wider society is we join a network. We join a network of things all the time. You've been exposed to it a lot. You know, if you think about how especially during COVID, if you think about how your education was structured, it was all about being part of a network. You were encouraged to join different networks at different times in order to have an education itself, because you physically couldn't go into that more disciplinary place of the school. You had to be subject to network power and network control instead. Okay. Basically, we have a giant dialectic in society because of networks. Dialectics means relationship between two bodies, a power relationship between two. I'm going to get into the history of it, but if you want to have a look, go and have a look for Hegel and indeed Marx. They talk about, Marx is called a dialectical materialist. He believes that there's all these different things in competition in society which produce new ideas. Our dialectic here, in terms of society, is the relationship we have between the network and us. And that still remains a kind of important idea. The problem I have with it is that it gives us no agency in the network or the power. And I think that's an incorrect way of thinking about things. But we can't doubt that the structure of the network we're involved in becomes very important in terms of how we actually experience everyday life. Okay, let's take 10 minutes. Well, no, actually, let's take 5 minutes. So we start again at 3. And I will talk about participatory culture, which is really, really dull. Now when?
Well, then next.